What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from Pink Tourmaline. And this one is all about why we should not fear death, at least in my humble opinion. Again, I'm not speaking from a place of 100% knowing and authority, but I'm going to present to you the 5 reasons why I don't fear death and why I think you shouldn't fear death as well. And we're going to be showing some clips and thoughts and ideas from different resources and different things like that that I've thought about and that I've contemplated. And again, if you're new to the channel, this channel is going to be a constant exploration about what life is all about. What is the purpose of life? And that, of course, will obviously entail what happens when we pass on from this life, because that's part of the same formula. That's going to be what informs us, obviously, while we're here, on how we should go about living the absolute best life possible. So this video is, of course, about what happens at the conclusion of our lives. Now, what I've covered thus far on the channel is, of course, statements from folks who have had near-death experiences. I think those are such valuable tools and valuable stories to help us get our head around what this life is all about, what the ethereal plane is all about. There's also amazing documentation gathered from hypnosis, and that's written about in The Journey of Souls, Memories from the Afterlife, and I'm continuing to read and educate myself as I go along. So again, I want to reemphasize, I'm not speaking from a place of authority where I'm claiming to 100% know anything. And I think if people are going to take a super harsh stance one way or the other, I think that's a little bit of a flaw. I think we should be open to having a dialogue and a discussion, but doing so in a fair way where we're just trying to objectively get to an answer, not trying to prove a particular point one way or the other. Okay. That being said, let's get into the mix. I want to talk about the reasons that I've come across that I want to share. And one other thing I want to start with is, it's interesting, my thoughts on, I know some people call it like spirituality, and I do refer to it as that as well, but when I talk about life and death and what's beyond and what's the purpose, I mean, these at the end of the day are fundamental questions, really scientific questions, if you think about it. And there should be no, in my humble opinion, I don't see a particular reason as to why we should have a divide between things that happen beyond life and cut that off from the realm of science. It's one and the same. It's a question about existence and purpose that I think we can actually approach and answer for. We don't just have to rely on age-old doctrines or religions or things like that. There's a lot of great information coming about and coming into existence on a regular basis via NDEs and via hypnosis. But let me back up a little bit before I dive into all this. Even throughout periods of my life where I kind of thought this was it, the life exists, there was no real point to it, and I was fine with that. It kind of gave me moments of, and the way I came to this idea, you could almost say, like, of being an agnostic or atheist, or somewhere in between, I guess. It's like, can't fully be an atheist. But it was me growing up in a particular religion, having a diverse group of friends that were parts of all sorts of different religious faiths and backgrounds. And then this idea that if you choose the wrong faith, it could mean eternal torment, which we're going to talk about as well in this video. And then I was so confused as to why I could have so many friends with different faiths, but only one could really be right, or at least that's what the particular doctrine seemed to say. And that eventually led me to think, none of these can be right. Or how can just one be right and the rest be wrong? And then everybody's going to be in big trouble just because they picked the wrong religion or picked the wrong thing. And that ended up leading me down a path of thinking it just must all be nonsensical. And there must be just no point. We're just here. We exist. We're just going to have fun and we leave. But even when I had that mindset, I didn't have a fear of death. I had a fear of dying, and the process of dying, and the process of death, which we're also going to talk about in this video, and the pain that you might endure and the feelings of isolation and loneliness. Like, those things scared me. But actually dying, I just thought, well, if we exist and then we cease to exist, we'll have no consciousness. We just zip out of existence. Or maybe our consciousness joins some other group think or group consciousness or something like that. But I was not really afraid. Now, as I've really changed my opinion, as I'm learning more from NDEs and from all these other stories and accounts, I'm definitely not afraid of death. And I do think our soul continues on, or spirit continues on, or energy, however you want to characterize it, it continues on. The only other thing that I think stands in the way then, or what sometimes people fear, is then, well, what if there's a bad place that you go to? What if there is a place of eternal torment or hell that's described, I guess, in multiple religions? And I never bought into that. That never made sense to me. We're going to get into all of that stuff in this video. All right, enough of an intro. Let's get into the reasons. So we're going to start with reason number one. And this is very interesting. This is from a hospice nurse, man. And I've heard that a lot of hospice nurses have crazy, interesting stories about their experiences with people right as they're about to pass and then immediately after they pass on. Now, she even shares a story here that will blow you away about one of her patients who essentially, as soon as they pass from their body, she was out in her car, came in and had this amazing interaction with her telepathically. And I've heard these stories actually exist, there's many of them with hospice nurses who deal with people that are on the verge of death and then eventually pass on. It happens quite regularly. So anyway, she does share that story in this clip. I chose not to include it because obviously on this channel, we're talking about tons of NDEs, and this is a NDE essentially by proxy, but it's a great story. But of course, I already believe that these NDE, I bought into them. I think that there's a lot of amazing stories that seem to all tell this kind of the same story, maybe with different vocabulary, different terms. But so I didn't feel it was necessary to share that second part of this story. But this first part is very interesting. And again, it goes back to the idea the body is designed to die. I mean, how interesting is it? Many of us, we even me, try and stay healthy, want to prolong our lives, want to cheat death. We have people right now actively, there's like a don't die conference. But at the end of the day, ultimately, I think it's a fruitless endeavor to some extent. I mean, let's enjoy our lives, let's extend our lives, let's live healthy lives. But the body is preset to die in so many ways. Even if you just think about telomeres and the way the body ages, why does it age? We're trying to find anti-aging remedies. Are we supposed to, or is this part of the program? Is this part of the game? Is this part of the process? I think it is. I'm starting to believe that it is, and it's just a vehicle by which our soul grows, improves, learns through this vehicle, and then we exit and return to where we're really from, which I think is the ethereal plane. But anyways, I wanted to share this. If you do have that fear of the process of dying, I think this is an amazing insight from this beautiful person, this beautiful soul who is a hospice nurse, who obviously is there to console and take care of people as they're on their way out. Such an amazing, honorable profession. But listen to what she has to say about the process of dying and why this has alleviated a lot of her fears of death.
How the body biologically helps us at the end of life was mind-blowing to me and totally made me not fear death, because biologically our body is built to live, built to survive birth, and built to help us die. And I saw that firsthand, and I still see that firsthand as a hospice nurse. So let me explain. I've said this before in other videos, but I'm just going to keep reiterating it so everyone can hear it over and over again. Our bodies are biologically built to die. When the body knows that it's getting towards the end of life, especially on hospice when you're dying a natural death, you're dying from something, but you're allowing the natural progression to happen. Mechanisms kick in that are built into the body to help us die. Example one, our calcium levels go up. When your calcium levels go up, you start sleeping more. So your body just sleeps and sleeps and sleeps and sleeps, which is nice. People always say, I want to just fall asleep and die. That is kind of what can gradually happen. Also, your body knows that it's shutting down, it's getting near the end. So it'll slowly start kicking in the mechanisms to shut off the feeling of hunger and the feeling of thirst. And you will start not eating and drinking more and more. So this gradual thing happens where you are sleeping a lot more, eating and drinking a lot less, sleeping a lot more, eating and drinking a lot less. And the body is doing that all for us. And when that starts happening, your body will eventually kick into ketosis, which releases endorphins, which makes you feel good and dulls pain. So the body does this all naturally without us doing anything as medical professionals. And to watch that as a medical professional firsthand, see it over and over again, it is fascinating and it is comforting.
Okay, so there you go. Just the idea. I mean, when I look at that and I think about that, it's just from birth, we are programmed to have a finite time here. And what I believe from hearing all these NDEs and hearing, these stories via hypnosis is that there's a reason for it. The purpose of coming here is to learn, to live, to do our best, basically to spread love is generally this kind of central theme that you hear over and over. Just be good to people, be good to ourselves, be good to each other. But it's for a finite period of time. The point is not to linger indefinitely. And this bolsters that idea. It's designed to die. And then also if you are having a fear of that process, I mean, I think this also lays some of those fears is like, wait a minute, even if we're with the medical care, but our body is already programmed naturally to make it somewhat more of a relaxed process, I guess you could say. Now, of course, I haven't been there, and I'm sure it's still a daunting thing to cross over when you're in hospice and you're facing it and you are in a lot of pain. So don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to downplay that process for people who are going through it right now, or people who have loved ones that are going through this right now. Don't mean to downplay it at all, but I did think this was interesting to me and I wanted to share it because I didn't know this until I heard this amazing account. So one other thing maybe to help allay those fears, if you do have a fear, maybe more of the process of dying. All right, and this is number 2 now. This might be my most controversial point, but I do want to go back to physics, to this basic idea of the law of conservation of energy. And by the way, this law may only be a law within this universe, maybe in the ethereal plane or beyond. It's not a law. I don't know. But this idea that we've essentially accepted as universally true is that energy is neither created nor destroyed. It simply changes form. I am going to use this to bolster the notion that energy that is piloting our bodies, and you might say it's just one and same, it's a matter energy connection and it just dissipates, and sure, it changes form and it just kind of goes into the ground, and that's the way of it transforming. But when I think about this, I think that there is an energy, there's a consciousness that's in us, and the consciousness, yes, it might change form, but I believe the consciousness will stay intact in some level. And that to me makes me think that yes, it does make sense that our energy, our essence continues on, just maybe outside of the body, and the body will break down, etc. But that energy continues on. This is just my idea that we do continue on. Either way, if we do or if we don't, which I did used to think that maybe we just dissipated, I still don't necessarily find that to be something so terrifying. It's a little sad because life is so fun. I love being alive. I want to continue my life and be around the people that I love. So if you do that, sure, I can see that coming to an end with looking at that with the tinge of sadness. However, I don't think that anymore. I definitely do think we continue on. But something I will tell you that I don't believe in, and I always thought was silly, was the idea of hell, of eternal torment for living the wrong life or choosing the wrong religion. So that brings me to point number 3. I believe the notion of eternal hell is nonsensical. Now, I have this little calculus image here, right? I'm a math guy. This is a limit. This is limit notation. It's kind of turned sideways, but it says the limit as x approaches infinity of 1 over x is 0. I feel like this is very emblematic of why I think the notion of eternal hell is nonsensical. So you think about it, first of all, in life, and again, I know maybe you might be saying, hey, well, the same analogies don't apply to afterlife or et cetera. I mean, you could say that, but usually when we have punishment, it serves a purpose. It's usually some sort of teaching vehicle or teaching lesson. And what are you going to learn? And you'll never have a chance to learn and change. What is there to learn? I mean, like, you tell me if this sounds silly or not, but what are you going to learn if you just take somebody after a finite amount of time, like finite, which is basically nothing in the grand scheme of eternity, you put them in this spot to do something, they don't do it, they fail, and then now you're just going to torture them forever and ever and ever. What benefit is that? And that's kind of messed up. Like, that's worse to do to an entity or a spirit. I'm laughing because it's just so, the idea always seemed silly to me. Even when I was a kid, I remember people trying to explain it to me, or adults, almost like in a Sunday school manner. I was just like, what? Why would that ever be a thing that makes any sense whatsoever? You know, like I could see a temporary place of punishment or whatnot, and then maybe you learn and grow from it. But eternal, and just for one life, for choosing the wrong religion, like that, it just made no sense. But the reason why I brought this calculus analogy is, if you take it, the idea is that life is the number 1 or 10, or it could be a million, right? If you quantify it that way. But as x goes to infinity, we can't fully grasp our brain. Infinity is almost a controversial concept in math. Is it a thing? Is it not? Is it just a total conceptual thing that we can't even process fully? But the idea is anything, even a million, a billion, a trillion, over infinity, the limit as x goes to infinity, the value of that goes to 0. To me, that indicates that if we're thinking about our finite life compared to the never-ending expansiveness of infinity, of eternity, is nothing. So it's a complete mathematical imbalance in terms of punishment in anything you could do in a finite amount of time. So it never made sense to me. Now, this is a retired bishop, that talks about the idea of hell, which is what I always felt, which I think if we really to ask our internal logical minds, why was it ever thought of or brought into existence? It's just a mechanism by which to like get people to do it's a carrot and a stick is essentially what it is. And he explains it right here. A retired bishop, check this out.
I don't think hell exists. I happen to believe in life after death, but I don't think it's got a thing to do with reward and punishment. Religion is always in the control business. And that's something people don't really understand. It's in the guilt-producing control business. And if you have heaven as a place where you're rewarded for your goodness and hell as a place where you're punished for your evil, then you sort of have control of the population. And so they create this fiery place, which has quite literally scared the hell out of a lot of people throughout Christian history. Mm-hmm. And it's part of a control tactic.
But wait a minute, you're saying that hell, the idea of a place under the earth or somewhere where you're tormented for an eternity, is actually an invention of the church?
I think the church fired its furnaces hotter than anybody else. But I think there's a sense in most religious life of reward and punishment in some form. The church doesn't like for people to grow up, because you can't control grown-ups. That's why we talk about being born again. When you're born again, you're still a child. The people don't need to be born again. They need to grow up. They need to accept their responsibility for themselves.
The only reason why I was laughing there is because the reporter was like, you're saying this is an invention? And because to me, I always felt that it was clearly an invention, and exactly that, some sort of a control mechanism. If, for example, and I think it makes more sense why they would have made it or stretched it out to be eternity, because perhaps maybe if they said, yes, you're going to go there for a set period of time and then you come out, maybe that wouldn't be a strong enough fear response. Be like, oh, fine, I'll have to deal with it for, a couple lifetimes or a couple 100 years, and then I'm back to, and then it's all good. So what does it matter? I can handle that. I can deal with that later. Versus, no, it's inescapable. What you do here, if you don't fall in line and if you don't accept what we're dictating, you're out. But I'd like to think that this is one perspective that really makes a lot of sense to me. I hope what I've shared also makes a lot of sense to me, but I don't know. I feel like if you just check in with yourself and check in with your heart, it makes no sense. And it is kind of, I just don't know why anything or anybody or any entity or the source would create us for a quick test, a one and done, and then subject us to eternal torment. I don't know. Doesn't make sense to me. Never did. And maybe, I hope this resonates with you and alleviates some fears if you have those similar fears about, oh my God, I might spend eternity being punished. I just don't think it makes any sense. Reason number 4 why I don't think we should fear death. This goes back to NDEs. Now, there are so many NDEs out there, and we're going to talk about that in reason number 5. People don't realize, and I had no idea as well until I started learning about these different stories and accounts about a year and a half ago. And I was going through a really difficult time, and man, they're just mind-blowing. But really, you don't even need all the NDEs back to back to back and read all of the research and the documentations and see the overlaps, which there's tons of that. And we're going to talk about that again in point number 5. But even just one right here, this account alone, and there's many accounts like this where there's no brain activity, but we have these crazy tales of like vivid recollections. Immediately right here, this shows that consciousness must exist beyond the body. Just one instance, unless you're going to just assume that it's pure fabrication. But the things that are described right after these states of essentially zero brain activity, right there, I think to me, it's just proof positive that the consciousness must have a place in existence beyond the body. The only thing you might say is, well, maybe the consciousness still exists, even though there's no brain activity because the body's alive. But maybe once the body fully ceases to pass on, the consciousness dissipates. I mean, you could think that. I don't believe that. That doesn't make sense to me. What I think is, again, it has a place in the body. And then even when the body ends, though, it will continue on. It just exits out. And again, like I said, this is this notion is supported by countless NDEs. But listen to this crazy story about an NDE, somebody being operated upon, where they tested her brain levels, and they had to make sure that she was essentially brain dead before operating on her, which means that what she recounts afterwards was nothing that was seen or dreamt of via the physical mechanism of the brain.
It was the case of Pam Reynolds, who had the blood completely drained from her body to correct an aneurysm. That's a blood vessel ballooning in her brain, deep in the base of her brain. And she needed her body to be cooled down to 60 degrees Fahrenheit for about an hour so they could do this operation. And they had to drain all the blood out of her body so the aneurysm wouldn't burst. And during that time, she had no brain waves. There was no metabolism going on in her brain because she didn't have any blood or oxygen going to her brain. She had molded speakers in her ears blasting loud signs, and they measured the brain waves that until there was no response at all to these loud sounds being blasted at her. So clearly she had no brain function during that time, yet she had what she says was the most vivid experience of her life, in which she saw things in the operating room, saw deceased loved ones, and so forth.
There's many stories like this, actually, where they essentially the energy or the soul or the spirit or whatever you want to call it exits the body and is able to travel around the hospital and hear conversations and then tell later, oh, I heard you say this. I heard, and this is in another room or another place in the hospital. Again, even just a handful of these stories to me right off the bat, because it defies any sort of potential logical way of reasoning that out, that like, yeah, well, how, if it's purely just a mechanism of the body, meaning consciousness, there's no way to explain how like that automatically flies in the face of it, contradicts it. It's a proof by contradiction. It's done. So we know it has to exist, or at least is able to exist outside of the body. I believe it continues to exist on, and the body is just a temporary vehicle. Okay, coming to the last point, again, this goes back to NDEs. These NDEs are plentiful, and I encourage you, if you have somehow found this channel, you're gravitating towards this content, I'm just trying to share, and I'm trying to spread a message of positivity, but I am not the authority. I don't know everything, but there are amazing NDEs out there. Next Level Soul Podcast is another amazing resource where you can hear the video accounts of a lot of folks who've had NDEs, but there's nearly 5,600 documented at the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, NDERF. I encourage you, if this is speaking to you and this is information that you're seeking out, check out this website, check out these other sources. There are so many accounts. And it's, again, the beauty, and I think the positive message, the positive messages can really be extracted and understood when you start to see NDE after NDE after NDE, and you start to see the commonalities from all these different people. And that tells me that we're all part of the same fabric. We're all part of the same ethereal plane, energy source, etc. We all go back to it. We share similar stories of what the ethereal looks like in our own vocabulary, in our own, through the lens of our own experiences and the lens of our own current lives. All I'll say is, to me, it's, man, I don't know. It's just made such a massive impact on me, and I'm inclined to really take it to heart. And I hope it, if it's what you're seeking, I hope it brings the same peace, calmness, and happiness to you as well. And that's all I got in this video. Those are my 5 reasons why I do not think you should fear death. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you guys so much for joining. I'm having so much fun with this channel. And let me know what else you want to hear me talk about. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.